sessions will be begun by the guidance through the keynote address by Dr. Ganesan. I invite Dr. Ganesan to give the keynote address and guide the conference.
नमो नेदिष्ठाय प्रियदवदविष्ठाय च नमो नमः क्षोदिष्ठाय स्मरहरमहिष्ठाय च नमः नमो वरिशिष्ठाय त्रिनयनयविष्ठाय च नमो नमः सर्वस्मै ते तदिदमतिशर्वाय नमो नमः तव तत्त्वं न जानामि कीदृशोऽसि महेश्वर यादृशोऽसि महादेव तादृशाय नमो नमः श्री नागराज पाटुडी, the organizer of this Indic Academy, and all other assembled scholars who are going to present paper in the 2 days conference. My pronouns to all of you, and I consider it a great honor and a privilege to have been invited to deliver this keynote address in this holiest city, Shiva Rajadhani. And Nagaraj ji told me that, announced that I am going to address the keynote address and guide the conference. It is not actually guiding the conference. I just put before you some points on Shaivism, and mostly based on the texts, because as I have been dealing with the texts, both published, unpublished, and the manuscripts for quite a long time, I have a few words which I want to share with all of you. My address, I just put the topic as two important branches of Shaivism, the Pashupata and the Shaiva Siddhanta, and future research projects. It is both a presentation of some points on the ancient forms of Shaivism, two of them, and the future. In future, what we are as scholars and interested persons, what we have to do for the preservation and propagation of this Shaivism in all its aspects. I have chosen Pashupata and Shaiva Siddhanta. Pashupata system and Shaiva Siddhanta are the two basic currents, not only for Shaivism, but all later forms of Agama Tantra based systems, both for Vaishnavism and still later the various branches of Shakta tradition. The Pashupata is a generic name which has so many different schools, sub-schools, and further historical developments. We can trace the origin of the Pashupata system in the Veda and much more in the Upanishads, especially the Shvetashvatara and Nilarudra, Atharva Shiras, Atharva Shika. That is on the one stream of our religious scriptural tradition. The other one is Shaiva Siddhanta, which is fully based on the Agamas. So Vaidiki, Tantriki are the two basic textual streams on which our entire Bharatiya religio-philosophical system, religio-philosophical tradition is based. That is why we have to bear in mind these two systems. And Shaivism, in a sense, and I think many of you will agree, and my opinion, it is the basis of all our entire religio-philosophical upasana, including the Vaishnavism, the Pancharatra, to name specifically, and the Shakta traditions. The Agama, the Shaiva Agamas, by Shaiva Agamas, of course, the Shaiva Siddhanta Agamas are meant, because that is the earliest. Among the Agama-based systems, Shaiva Siddhanta is the earliest. We can trace its origin from the 5th, 3rd, 4th century at the latest. And the Pashupata system. So, initially, I will present a few points on the Pashupata system, mostly based on the texts. Though I will give you a general outline of the Agamas, what is meant by Agamas, then I will, because Shaivism is a system which has both Veda and Agama, or the both its base. As the 13th century Shaiva Acharya, Arulnandi Shivacharya says in Tamil, Vedanul, Shaivanul endru irande noolgal. So the entire textual corpus comes under the Vedic tradition and Shaiva tradition. And everything is the offshoot of these two textual streams. So, place of the Shaiva Agamas. Next to the Vedas, it is the Agamas. Am I audible? Suddenly it is. Okay. It is the Agamas, I think. And the Puranas that hold the key for the widespread diffusion of the Sanatana Dharma. The ideals propounded in the Vedas that are prescriptive in nature have all been expanded and expounded with new vigor by the Agamas and the Puranas to be suitable and acceptable for the mass. Of them, the Shaivagamas stand out as a class of scripture possessing varied nature and dimensions. As a special type of scripture, Vishesha Shastra, the influence of the Agamas on almost all aspects of the Bharatiya culture is immense. The Agamas are basically religious texts, while many gods such as Indra, Agni, Prajapati are praised in various Vedic hymns and oblations are offered in them in the Vedic sacrifices. We do not find a general procedure in those texts to worship one single god exclusively. On the other hand, a clear conception of the supreme deity along with its various aspects and a definite viewpoint on the final goal of human existence are all well defined and discussed in the Agamas. They propound a complete system of religious practice which is fully based on the conception and the eventual devotion towards a single supreme God. The Shaivagamas present a complete ritual procedure based on a sound doctrinal conception that includes, among other things, highly developed methodological discussions on the highest reality, its functions and relation to the individual selves as well as to the material world, etc. The Agamas also contain separate sections on a few chapters on yoga. From various references in the literature, we come to know that there were Agama texts for different gods such as Vinayaka, Surya, Kumara, etc., apart from Shiva, Vishnu, and various forms of goddesses. Then there are different schools of Shaivism. As it's known, Shaivism comprises many sub-schools with distinct doctrinal basis and ritual programs. More important among them are the Pashupata, Shaiva Siddhanta, Lakula, Kalamukha, etc. All these schools were very widespread in many parts of India and in countries like Cambodia, Java, etc. of Southeast Asia during the early medieval period, for which we have ample inscriptional evidences. Other schools of Shaivism such as the Soma Siddhanta were also prevalent in some places. But the two Shaiva systems, Pashupata, mostly the Lakula branch and its offshoots, and the Shaiva Siddhanta were, by all accounts, the most pan-Indian Shaiva systems that have been exerting greatest influence in the domain of religion of our motherland. Taking mainly the inscriptions, we can very well notice that these two systems, of which the Pashupata was the earlier one, had spread in almost all parts of the country with their strong monastic networks that were patronized by many royal dynasties and a proliferation of literature of which the Agamas were the fundamental texts. Unfortunately, many of the Agamas of the Pashupata tradition have been lost. So, Pashupata Shaivism. The Pashupata religion is very ancient. We can say with certainty that it has a long and continuous history for more than 3000 years. Starting from the Upanishads, such as the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, Atharvashika, Atharvashiras, we get many references of the Pashupata religion in the Mahabharata. For example, the Anushasana Parva, where Sri Krishna gets Diksha into intense Shaiva practices under the great sage Upamanyu. Then come the many Puranas such as the Linga, Vayu, Kurma, Padma, Skanda, and the Shiva Mahapurana, especially the Vayaviya Samhita, to cite a few of them. Next come in line the special and unique type of text such as the Shiva Dharma, Shiva Dharmottara, Shiva Upanishad, which appear to have been exclusively composed to propagate Shaivism, especially the Pashupata types, to the common man. These texts, known for convenience as the Shiva Dharma textual corpus among scholars, since Shiva Dharma is the very first one, or of a poetical or of a special genre. They preach supreme and unflinching bhakti to Shiva, the highest and supreme God, worshipping Shiva in many different ways through different means. At the same time, these texts preach service to humanity and many ethical and moral principles. These texts are a storehouse of many views and practices that are not known widely in modern times. Considering the greatness and their utility in establishing a society fully based on morals and fellow feeling among the masses, for which Shiva Bhakti plays a fundamental and pivotal role, the Chola kings of Tamil Nadu, especially during the 10th to 12th century Common Era, have established endowments in many of the Shiva temples exclusively to propagate the Shiva Dharma ideals regularly to the common man, which act is known in the inscriptions on Tamil, Shiva Dharmam Vakkanittal, that is to expound, Vyakhyana, that become in Tamil it is Vakkanittal. So there are hundreds of endowments in many Shiva temples in the Chola period, exclusively to propagate the Shiva Dharma in Tamil, as we come to know from many Chola inscriptions. As an example, one may cite how the 8-limbed Shiva Bhakti is presented in the text of Shiva Dharma in such early times. Shiva Dharma can be dated to up to the 6th to the 8th century approximately. So Shiva Bhakti is defined as Mat Bhakta Jana Vatsalyam Pujayam Anumodanam Swayam Abhyarchanam Bhaktya Mamartecha Angacheshtitam Matkatha Shravane Bhaktihi Swara Netra Anga Vikriya Mama Anusmaranam Nityam Yaschamamcha Upajivati Bhakti Rashtavidha Jneya Yasmin Mlechepi Vartate Saviprendro Samunihi Shriman Sayatihi Sacha Panditaha. Even a Mlecha who has such a bhakti towards Shiva, as described in the verses, towards he is dearer to Shiva. It is very interesting to note that some of the ideas expressed in the Shiva Dharma are also found in the Vayaviya Samhita, the 7th book of the Shiva Mahapuranam. Sometimes we find many verbatim similarities among the passages in both the texts. It is Vayaviya Samhita and the Shiva Dharma. We may say, especially the Uttara Bhaga of the Vayaviya Samhita, we may say that the Shiva Dharma had influenced much of the ideas of the Vayaviya Samhita. The great ideals of Shiva Bhakti, service to humanity with fellow feeling, and thus uniting the entire humanity under the umbrella of Shiva Bhakti, as propounded in the Shiva Dharma, was propagated by the greatest of the Shiva Bhaktas, namely the Nayanmars, in the period between the 6th to 8th century. The thousands of Shiva Bhakti drenched and soulful Tamil hymns which are collectively known as the Tevaram corpus, bear testimony to this supreme ideal. It can be said that these Nayanmars singing in Tamil language, in fact, carried the ideals of Shiva Dharma to the masses. Among many such parallels, there are so many parallels which we can cite, and I have been doing studies on that. Just to cite an example, among many such parallels, one may cite the following hymn of Tirunavukarashar, who lived in the 7th century. Shankanidhi Padumanidhi Irandum Tandu Dharaniyodu Vanalavat Taruvarenum Vanala Taruvarenum Manguvar Avarshilbam Madipo Mallom Mahadevarku Yegandar Allarahil. That is one. Angamelam Koraindu Aluhu Todu Noyarai Avurithi Tindrudalum Pulayarenum Gangaiva Shadayatku Gangaiva Shadikarandarku Anbarahil Avargandir Namvanangum Kadavulare. This passage, Tirunavukarashar Tevaram passage, states eloquently, even a person possessing the great wealths such as the Shankanidhi and Padumanidhi, if he does not have any devotion towards the Shiva, we do not care for him. But on the other hand, even if a person of low birth, afflicted with such diseases as leprosy, has bhakti towards the Shiva, we consider him as our God and we are his devotees, which is in fact the corroboration of the Shiva Dharma passage. Name Priyas Chaturvedi Madbhakta Shvapachopi Yaha Sasmai Deyam Tato Grahyam Sachapujyo Yathahi Aham. So, in the Shiva Dharma. So, Pashupata system has its own sub-schools. The Lakula system and the slightly later Tantrika Pashupata school, then Kalamukha, further developments. We come to know about its later transformations into the Kalamukha, Vaimala, Pancharthika and others. The core doctrine of all the Shaiva systems is the concept of Tri Padartha, Padarthatrayam, Pati, Pashu, Pasha. This we find declared in the Shvetashvatara Bhokta, Bhogyam, Preritarancha Matva, Sarvam Proktam, Trividham, Brahma Metat, Ksharam Pradhanam, Amritaksharam Haraha, Ksharatmanau, Ishate, Deva Ekaha. So this Pati, Pashu, Pasha, three divisions of three Padartha, entire Padartha into three categories, is the basis of all Shaivism. So this we find in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Shiva is the Purusha, the highest reality, which the Upanishad declares as follows. Yasmat param naparamasti kinchit, yasman naniyo najyayosti kashchit, vrikshaiva stabdho divitishtati ekaha, tenedam purnam purushena sarvam. The same view is, so Shiva is the supreme Purusha, the highest Purusha. The same view is corroborated by the immortal Kavi, Kalidasa, in his Mangala Shloka of Vikramaurvashiyam. Vedanteshu yamahu reka purusham vyapyasthitam rodasi yasmin ishvaraiti ananya vishaya shabdo yatharthaksharaha. So the Purusha expressed in the Vedanteshu, in the entire Vedanta corpus Upanishad, is none other than Shiva. Just as the Shvetashvatara Upanishad declares that supreme bhakti leading to total surrender at the feet of Shiva is the one and the only means to attain moksha in the passage, Yo Brahmanam Vedadhati Purvam, Yo Vai Vedamsha Prahinoti Tasmai, Tamha Devam Atma Buddhi Prakasham Mumukshur Vai Sharanam Aham Prapadye. So, total surrender, Prapatti, is declared in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad as the supreme means of attaining Shiva, realizing Shiva. The same is repeated in Kalidasa, by Kalidasa in the same verse. Antariyasya mumukshubhihi niyamita pranadibhir mrigyate sasthanuhu sthira bhakti yoga sulabho nishreyasaayastu vaha. The same supreme reality, the Purusha, supreme Purusha, namely Shiva, who is meditated upon, who is realized by great sages, by practicing pranayama and others, mind control. He is also attainable by supreme devotion, sthira bhakti yoga sulabha. So this is the speciality of the inner basic defining characteristic of all forms of Shaivism, especially the Pashupata and the Shaiva Siddhanta, where bhakti, at the same time knowledge, that is knowledge of reality, and yoga, everything is part of it. everything combined, everything are complementarily, they are practiced to attain Shiva. Now, to present more about the Pashupata system, its in historical period, I will just deal, then come to the Shaiva Siddhanta. I think, okay, no, sorry. Okay, let's see. As I have mentioned earlier, the Satya Pashupata system is specially followed by Krishna, who was initiated, given Diksha by Upamanyu. Krishna presents his practice in his first person account. So I did this. So in the Anushasana Parva, there are more than 2 or 3 chapters where Sri Krishna presents his practice of Pashupata system and how he got blessed by Shiva and his Yogeshwaratva. This he demands 8 boons from Shiva, of which dharme, so that is his mind should always be fixed in dharma, and Yogeshwaratva. So yatra Yogeshwara Krishno yatra partho dhanurdhara, that idea expressed in this verse which Krishna is spoken. That is the blessing of Shiva, which Krishna got from Shiva when he, after practicing this Pashupata Vrata. These are all recorded in the Anushasana Parva by Krishna's own words. Now, and so this is briefly tracing the Pashupata from the Upanishads, then the Puranas, and the Shiva Dharma, which is the Shiva Dharma textual corpus, which was so well known, so much studied, but unfortunately due to various reasons now it is not, those texts are not much known, of which many manuscripts exist in the Nepal collections and also in the various parts of our country, including our French Institute, in different scripts. So Shiva Dharma textual corpus is so much prevalent, so much studied. So this is a form of Pashupata system, common one, which is for the practice for the common mass, studied by the common men, and which records the practices of the common mass about the Shiva Bhakti and Shiva worship, and the fellow feeling about the organization of the society on the basis of Shiva Bhakti and service. Then come the Agamas as a special type of literature, which is also, this corpus also is so ancient, of which Shaiva Siddhanta is the one very important example, which has continuous history of nearly 2000 years. Even now it is practiced and studied, and though other forms of Shaivism, other subschools of Shaivism are, in some areas they are known, some are not so much studied nowadays and practiced. So I present before you the Shaiva Siddhanta, the Agama based Shiva school. Taking the division expounded in 5 minutes? 10 minutes? 10 minutes. Taking the division expounded in many of the Shaiva Agamas, Shaivism consists of 4 types: Shaiva, Pashupata, Soma, and Lakula. The first one, Shaiva, which is called the Shuddha Shaiva, is again divided into Vama, Dakshina, and Shaiva Siddhanta. Each of these traditions had their own agamas, of which many are now lost. The 28 Shaiva agamas, beginning from Kamika and ending with Vatula, teach the Shaiva Siddhanta. We have the verses from the Kamika agama. And then Shaiva agamas vis-a-vis the Vedas. It was the early Shaiva Siddhanta stalwarts such as Sadhyo Jyoti, Ramakantha, etc., then followed by great Nayayika such as Udayana, Jayanta Bhatta, who completely refuted the Shabda Nityatva view of the Mimamsakas and defended the concept of Agama as another class of revealed scriptures by Shiva, and firmly established the view that the Vedas were also given by Shiva, which is the fundamental reason for their validity. They have Shrikantha in his Brahma Sutra Bhashya, he says, Vedopi Shivagama Eva. So even Veda is a Shivagama, because both Veda and Shivagama were expounded by Shiva. In that way, they are not different. So both are Pramana, Shrikantha says. Then I have given a few passages from the Shaiva Siddhanta commentators who established the validity and the supreme pramanya of the Shaiva Agamas. Umapati, in his detailed commentary on the Paushkara Agama, states that the Shiva Puja prescribed in the Vedas, that is the relationship between how they are non-different, or in the sense not exactly non-different, but they are non-contradictory to each other, complementary. He says, Shaivagama states that Shiva Puja prescribed in the Vedas presupposes as its details expounded in the Shaivagamas. Therefore, the Shaivagamas can very well be taken to be like the Kalpasutras, etc., which are limbs to the Vedic corpus. Pratyaksha Veda Vihita Tat Puja Dehe Kamikadi Agama Vihita Iti Kartavyata Sapekshatvena Tat Pradipadaka Shakhantariya Angavakyanam Iva Tadrishanam Kalpasutranam Iva Va Adi Mahajana Parigrhitatvat. So the Diksha and other such rites expounded and prescribed in the Shaivagamas have all been considered to be valid by such great sages as Shveta, Upamanyu, Agastya, and such divine personages as Krishna, Rama, etc., who have undergone the Shiva Diksha as explained in the epics such as the Mahabharata, Harivamsha. The Skanda Purana states, Adhikari Bhedena Naikasyapi Tatha Dvijaha Tarkairetehi Margastu Na Hantavyaha Manishibihi iti. Then further, then the actual position is, while the Vedas are for the Trivarnikas, the Shaivagamas are meant for all, and they encompass women and people of low birth. Yadi Sarvatmana Siddhanta Shaiva Agama Siddhanta Shaivagama Vedayoho Abedaha Kimartam Tad Ubayoho Nirmanamiti Chetu Asti Iyan Anayoho Bhedaha Vedaha Trivarnika Adhikaraha Agamascha Chaturvarnika Adhikara iti. Etadapi Yuktam Shrikanta Bhashye, as I have told, Vedaha Trivarnika Vishayaha Sarvavarna Vishayascha Anyaha Agamaha iti. Then, so this is the importance and the hoary past of the Shaiva Siddhanta tradition based on the 28 Agamas. And there are also other points. For want of shortage of time, I am just presenting only a few points. Now then the critical edition of the Shaiva Agamas. Now so much we have seen the texts, but how are they available now? The Agamas and the editions, and in future what has to be done, that I will just present a few points. The Shaivagamas are widespread throughout the Bharata Desha as well as in other countries. Being the fundamental text, the Shaivagamas have regional influences in various levels. Also, many of the rituals vary according to the time, region and situation. A detailed and comparative study based on historical evolution of rites is one of the most rewarding researches of the Agamas. Then we find that these Agamas have been written in different materials such as palm leaf, and mainly palm leaf, and of course other materials also in the other parts of India. Then about the problems or some basic ideas which we have to bear in mind while critically editing the Agamas I have presented. The Agamas that have been copied in the manuscripts served as reference texts and texts of authority whenever a doubt or debate arises with regard to a particular rite. So, from my experience with the manuscripts from the French Institute collection, which holds the largest number of Shaiva manuscripts in the world now, and which has come under the UNESCO's register of the memory of the world register. All the 28 Mula Agamas manuscripts are available with us, and also a few Upagamas. So, fortunately, which I have presented here, then so to skip through, and there are interesting chapters in the some of the Shaiva Agamas, how to write a manuscript, how to preserve them, and how to copy the manuscript for posterity. All the details are given in the Amshumad Agama, in the Achintya Vishwasadakya Agama, etc. Another important point which we have noticed, in the Shaiva Siddhanta tradition, for a Shaiva Acharya, he after doing the Shiva Puja, he has to do the Vidyapitha Puja daily. It is prescribed. Vidyapitha means the Agamas, that is the seat of knowledge. So every Shaiva Acharya has to have a few copies of the Agama manuscripts for his daily worship. So for that, the manuscripts are copied and worship established on the, that is in Pratishtha, the initial ritual procedure is given, then he has to do daily worship. And these chapters, they describe how it should be copied. So these are some of the details which we can learn from the Agamas in copying, preserving, and doing not only pratishtha for worship daily, but also to read regularly. Because Shaiva Acharya, after his Madhyanika worship, after his food, from approximately from 2 o'clock to in the evening, he has to spend his time studying the manuscript, expounding the Shaiva Agamas to his disciples, and he can compose commentaries if he is so much well versed. So all these ritual, the academic activities based of studying, propagating the Agamas are also prescribed for a Shaiva Acharya. In this way, both not only the ritual, but at the same time the knowledge preserved in the Agamas are copied in the manuscript for the posterity. At the same time, they are expounded. So everything, the entire propagation of the Shaiva Siddhanta ideals are well recorded in the Shaiva Agamas as a ritual duties of the Shaiva Acharya. So various other details, how one has to prepare the ground, and the various still minute details about the size of the palm leaf, how to copy, how to write, how write legibly, and after copying, he has to read, he invites scholars. So all the details are given, which, okay. And then the language of the Shaiva Agamas, which we have to learn as scholars who study and edit the Agamas. The language of the Shaiva Agama is considered to be Aisha, that is spoken by Ishvara, but Ishvara Sambandhi, just as the Puranas and Itihasas are considered to be Arsheya, spoken by the Rishis. So naturally, there are different, the language is slightly different in the Agamas entirely, and especially in the Shaiva Agamas. So the general rule of the Paninian grammar are generally they are not observed, and we also cannot always study the manuscript Agamas through the eye of Vyakarana. A deep knowledge of various types of rituals, of various kinds of ingredients used in those rites, a firm knowledge in the doctrines of the Shaiva system that these texts treat, are a few prerequisites to have a standard critical edition of the Shaiva Agamas. Of course, while going through many and more of these texts in the manuscripts, one's knowledge in these disciplines is enriched. So, peculiar usage of Sanskrit verbal forms which may appear to be ungrammatical or unpaninian are found at many places in the Shaiva Agama corpus. In the same way, one may not find clear correspondence regarding gender, linga, and vachana. So, main reason behind such apparent incongruencies is that the authors and redactors of the entire Agama corpus were more concerned with conveying the actual meaning of the text than in the form of the words. in conclusion, I will just present a few points on the future research projects in Shaivism. It is not actually exhaustive, but some important points which we have to do in the coming years. Since Shaivism is very ancient and its literature is so vast, a survey of the entire Shaiva literature is to be undertaken. So the entire Shaiva literature includes basically Sanskrit, at the same time regional languages Shaiva literature, and as I will tell, there are still many more texts available in Tamil and on treating Shaivism, especially Shaiva Siddhanta, and we have to take a survey of the entire Shaiva literature, both published and unpublished. First, Shaiva Siddhanta. Here, since Shaiva Siddhanta has a continuous history of nearly 2000 years and which is widespread in all parts of our Bharata Desha, other than texts in Sanskrit, there are still others in the regional languages. The enormous textual corpus in Tamil, beginning from the 6th, 7th centuries to the present day, is to be included in this survey. We should consider ourselves blessed, since the manuscripts of all the 28 agamas and a handful of the upagamas of the Shaiva Siddhanta are available now, whereas the agamas of many of the other related texts of the Pashupata system, comprising the Lakula, Kalamukha and Soma Siddhanta, have been lost, while slightly more than a dozen of these agamas have been critically edited and published by the French Institute of Pondicherry in the course of these 60 years. The other agamas have to be critically edited and published. Of equal importance is translating these Shaivagamas into many of the regional languages, or to begin with into Hindi and English, in order to have wider reach and circulation. The second point, along with the agamas, the rich literature of Paddhati texts, which is one of the many specialities of the Shaiva Siddhanta, awaits scholarly attention. From the 7th, 8th century onwards, we come to know about the existence of commentaries on the Shaivagamas, and in the same way, Paddhatis were composed in many parts of our country, even as early as the 9th century. We have references and a few words about Paddhati. So the ritual Paddhati is, of course, in the Smarta system also there are Paddhatis, but Shaiva Siddhanta is something special, I should say. From the earliest period, the 8th and 9th centuries onward, ritual Paddhatis are composed, which are very elaborate. The ritual is divided into 3 broad categories, Nitya, Naimittika and Kamya. So among the Nitya ritual, getting up from the bed, Shayanothana, to going to bed the night, entire ritual sequence is described, covered, minute details. Such a minute details, I'm not hyperbolic. It is only available only in the Shaiva Paddhati literature. Similarly, in the Naimittika, where comes the Diksha. So the Diksha ritual, the various types of Diksha, and all are, and then the construction of the temple, which is again another huge literature part, ritual part. So this Paddhati literature, there are many. They have been composed in different parts of our country, beginning from Kashmir to Tamil Nadu. There are various ritual Paddhatis. Fortunately, many of them are available, except a few have been lost. So this Paddhati literature is apart from its knowing the Shaiva ritual one, it records the history of rituals. So any form of Shaivism, especially the Shaiva Siddhanta and Pashupata system, they have 2 broad aspects: the ritual, at the same time knowledge, that is knowing the doctrinal principles. So just in studying the philosophical points like Pati, Pashu, Pasha and Shambhava Upaya, Anava Upaya, nothing. So one has to practice the ritual. Then only one can realize the what has been explained in the Agamas. So ritual is very much important. Different forms of ritual. One cannot go out of ritual in any way. whether for a actual sadhaka in the initial stage or the advanced stage. So paddhatis are so much important, and there are commentaries for the paddhatis. So it is not something recent one. The commentaries are starting from the 11th centuries onwards. Especially the Somashambhu Paddhati is a very detailed commentary by Trilochana Shivacharya, who lived in the 12th century. Somashambhu lived in the 9th century. And in the commentaries on the Agamas, again, so the Matanga Parameshwara Agama and Mrigendra Agama, they were all been commented from the 8th, 9th century onwards. Fortunately, the commentaries are available. So, the Agamas as well as the Paddhatis have been commented by Acharyas. In such a way, this Shaiva Siddhanta, Shaiva Agama tradition has been preserved and propagated for the posterity. And when we have to take up the edition of the Paddhatis, all the available Paddhatis, of course, one or two have been published. There are still more are available now. Many are available in the Nepal manuscripts collection. So that one has to take the other project. Yes. Yes. What is more, there are quite a few commentaries on these Paddhatis since the 12th century, which are some of the special features of the Shaiva Siddhanta that attest to the fact that it was very widespread throughout the country and propagated by a highly intricate, effective network of mathas, such as the acclaimed Golaki and the Amardaka Matha, through their branches. We have hundreds of inscriptions that testify to this historical fact. Among the many Vedic and Agamic systems, it is the Shaiva Siddhanta which possesses such an amount of Paddhati texts and a continuous history. They are a rich source of the study of the concept of ritual and its history, and the Mantra Shastra and ritual practices. These Mantra Shastra, these concepts are the basic for the later many forms of Shakta Agamas, and including some of the Vaishnava Agamas such as Lakshmi Tantra, etc. Then the third one, the vast amount of Sthala Puranas and Sthala Mahatmyas related to the hundreds of Shaiva Kshetras are another rich source of Shaiva religious practice. Taking the case of Tamil Nadu, there are many Shaiva Kshetras which have Sthala Puranas. Some of them have even 3 and 5, such as the Chidambaram temple has 5 Sthala Puranas, composed in Sanskrit, and many of them dating to the 11th, 12th centuries. So, such early period we have the Sthala Purana literature. Then, yes, and there are hundreds of Tamil adaptations of the Sthala Puranas, which are called Thala Puranam in Tamil. They are available. Only a few of them have been published. From the 14th, 15th century onwards, we have Tamil Thala Puranams, and it is a genre, a type of literature. Such is the speciality of the Thala Puranam literature in Tamil. So this is another important project. Apart from the Shaiva Siddhanta texts, there are also other Shaiva texts belonging to the Vedic Pauranic school, such as the Shruti Sukti Mala, composed by Sudarshana Suri, also known as Haradatta, in the 11th, 12th century, who establishes the supremacy of Shiva on the basis of Veda, especially the Rig Veda and the Taittiriya Aranyakam, and it has 2 commentaries. And then these are only a few examples of different types of Shaiva literary corpus that should be critically edited, preferably with translations. As I told you, Hindi and English to begin with, accompanied by detailed summaries in these languages. Then manuscripts preservation and training of scholars for the future. A few words about preservation of manuscripts, palm leaf and paper. A larger number of manuscripts are still lying under private custody that need careful attention. Apart from preserving them, a band of young scholars have to be trained in reading these manuscripts written in old scripts, such as the Grantha, Nandinagari, Tigadari, Tamil, etc., and much more. There are many varieties of scripts, old scripts available in the Nepal manuscripts collection, whether it's Kutila, Gupta, Lichavi, and interestingly, many of the, at least quite a few of them are dated manuscripts. And the Shaiva Agama manuscript, especially the Kirana Agama, 9th century dated manuscript is available in the Nepal collection. So these manuscripts that are available in the private collection throughout the country, they are to be preserved. And as a coordinator of the National Mission for Manuscripts, NMM, for manuscript survey for nearly 9 to 10 years, I have first-hand experience of visiting in Tamil Nadu, many villages, interior villages, private collections, hundreds and hundreds are still there, where they have manuscripts of all texts, Shaivism, Shaiva Agama, and Puranas, and Stotra literature, and Tamil literature, and so many. They have to be preserved in a different way, but that is the not only studying the published texts, but also for preserving the manuscripts. We have to take as a very important of research projects for the future. National Mission for Manuscripts he has been doing. Initially, it was the survey was very useful, and we have collected more than millions of manuscripts, but documented. But the preservation has to be undertaken, and these are all important projects for the posterity to preserve the Shaiva heritage of our country. And with this, I conclude my brief speech, which you can call keynote address. I don't know whether it is keynote or not, but a few of my thoughts regarding this Shaiva system and the text. I thank one and all for your patient hearing. I thank once again the Indic Academy for giving me an opportunity to share some of my views. Namah Shivaya.